if you are a youngster and you've got some talent, well, you don't want to miss this next interview with our guest who has just recently returned from a trip to Europe where he took his Dandenong City junior squad to a youth tournament, a junior tournament in Spain. And to hear all about that, it's an absolute pleasure to welcome to the OzCro Soccer Show the technical director of Dandenong City, LJUBAN Palinic. LJUBAN, good evening, and how are you?
Good evening, Tonchi. Well, mate, it's good to be back, but definitely the weather is very different, that's for sure.
I was going to say the weather must be very well. The Melbourne weather in today has been absolutely abysmal, and it's not something that you would have enjoyed compared to what you were experiencing over in Spain. But mate, let's first of all talk about it. How did that come about? It was the Donosti Cup. Is that right? Is that what it's called?
Yeah, it's called the Donosti Cup. So I guess it's been something in the pipeline for a little while about creating opportunities for our kids to be able to go abroad and create international pathways long term. It's something that I've always wanted to create in our environments, and obviously allow our kids to see a future beyond possibly the A-League. So it started a little while ago, and we were very lucky to be able to experience it with our first group of 15, 16 and 17-year-olds who travelled with us over the last 2 weeks.
Yeah, we can see some photos there, and just the experiences of being visiting some of these unbelievable stadia setups, some of the incredible facilities, but also getting an opportunity to train there and to play against some of the some of the best kids in their age group. How did the touring party find this, and how did the boys find it in particular?
It was incredible. I'd highly recommend it to every kid and every parent who has the capacity to be able to do it, to go abroad and be able to see, Europe in particular. And I mean, I guess we chose Spain specifically because of the style of football, and it aligns with our vision and our way of wanting to develop players. But, we were lucky enough to have approximately 910 teams in that tournament. There was 30 different countries involved.
Wow.
So we had a broad or a variety of games that were involved, and I guess we got an opportunity to also visit some of the stadiums, have some of the clinics with obviously clubs, and then the biggest opportunity for us as coaching staff was to be able to go and see the Barca set up, and obviously La Masia, as you can see there in the background. That was incredible. You walk up to the front, you have to provide your passport to be able to get into this facility. It's all locked, so it's not that anyone can sort of walk through. So that was incredible. It was a real eye opener, and I'm really glad that I did that with one of my obviously key coaches at the club, for us to be able to shape the future and create a better pathway for our kids here in Australia, because there is still, in my opinion, a big gap in comparison to what there is abroad.
I mean, just the scope of what we see there with the facilities and that experience must have been absolutely mind-boggling and overwhelming. But at the same time, it would have been, I can only imagine, it would have been very inspirational for the kids and the parents and the coaches there as well. But from your perspective, you personally, what did you most take out of the whole experience? So we'll talk about how many games they played and how they go and all of that kind of stuff. But what did you take away from the whole experience that you feel you're going to incorporate in your work as a professional coach?
Look, I guess it's probably very difficult to try and replicate what is in Europe here in Australia. But one of the biggest things that I would say is an integral part in developing success is culture. And when I say culture, it's living and breathing football. When you talk to the person on the street, they're talking about football. When you talk to the the guy who's serving you coffee, he's talking about football. So it's very difficult to emulate that in our environments. But it's certainly possible at Dandenong City by creating a culture where people feel that that's their club, that's their pathway towards professional football. I guess in many different environments, in particular with the NPL setup, is that you see a lot of kids moving from environment to environment, and we certainly want to create an environment where we're developing our own, and we're able to do that through retaining a high percentage of players within our environments who belong to the club. And looking at for example, Noah Skorkel, I remember when I was at Melbourne Victory trying to get him to Melbourne Victory, and now I look back and go, I'm really glad that he stayed in his environment, because culture breeds talent. And he was in a good environment with some great fantastic coaches, and obviously made the move at the right time, and with good experience of his father, who's seen a lot of what's around in and around Europe, made that call. And I certainly think that a lot more kids should be embarking on that journey, regardless of the outcome. It should be an experience.
Yeah.
It should be an opportunity to grow, not personally feeling that I must get my contract if I do go abroad.
Yep. Now, that what you talk about culture conjures up a really interesting conversation I had a while back with John Didolitza, who, when he was the chief executive of the Players Football Association, the PFA, he actually produced a report about how important culture is to the development of young players, and obviously we know that people who are involved with our Croatian community-backed clubs, we know the importance of culture in many ways. Even though I guess the pathways aren't there that they used to be once upon a time in the old NSL days, and we used to produce a lot of talented Australian Croatian players, we seem to be coming back now with young Noah Slunski, Anthony Didlitz in the Australian under-17 team, obviously with Noah Skorko there as well. But we seem to have that something in our DNA with the Australian Croatian kids, that they seem to really football is such a big thing. If anything, we could harness, I guess, that cultural element of it. It's maybe at our clubs. Now, I know we don't have the resources that the Barca Academy and Girona and all of these don't have, but is there something that we could incorporate in our functions at our clubs that could maybe try and take it to another level, whether it be that culture, whether it be that talent production, whether it be the structure? I mean, that's a pretty open-ended question, isn't it?
Yeah, look, I think in my reflection over the, say, last 10 years and being involved in a variety of environments across Australia, we certainly can't do what the top clubs in Europe do. It's incredibly impossible. But I certainly do believe that we can do things in line with the current A-League clubs. And I don't see any reason why a Dandenong City can't emulate or deliver programs in line with what's delivered in the A-League environments. I think you do certainly need to find good people, and that takes time and that takes process. And you have to have a clear understanding of what your identity wants to become or what it's going to be. So first is to know where you want to go, and then it's second to find the people who want to come on that journey. And I think in my time over the last sort of 3 years, coming back to the club at Dandenong City, we've been very clear on where we want to go, which has helped us shape the programs and bring in the people that want to drive in the same direction. Because I guess it's very challenging when you've got, a committee who wants to go in one direction, then you've got your coach who wants to go in another direction, then you've got your youth coaches who want to go in their own direction. This becomes incredibly difficult to manage. And so for us, it's been an enjoyable, challenging journey, which we've only began, in my opinion, and there's a long way to go, but we've certainly taken big steps to be able to get to this point at this point in time. And I think, the international football pathway is another step for our program to be able to go that 1% more and become, better as a club. That's the objective. The objective is to be able to, give them an experience, one, for them to be able to come back and grow and learn and continue to be motivated to become better footballers. And then the second thing is to be able to create the relationships abroad for there to be future international football pathways for us as a club and a program.
Yeah, well, a few weeks ago we had Mick Schwaljek from Dandenong City, coach of the under-23s and under-18s. And it was interesting chatting to Mick both on air and off air. And it certainly seems that you guys there are providing a lot of opportunities for talented young footballers and footballers in general, but young kids. But there are schools there that you're involved in that offer soccer-specific programs. Then there's also the, I guess, futsal is also quite a big part of the offering for some of the kids there as well. And obviously there's the NPL program and the various academies. So in effect, we're now starting to develop a sport that kids who want to play and parents who want their kids to play can pretty much play all year round.
100%. A part of our cycles or macro cycle is to provide a program that kids don't need to go anywhere else but Dandenong City. Obviously, we're working to take steps to achieve that, which means that strategically we need to look at the infrastructure that we have and being able to achieve that whilst also managing the club's community objectives, which takes time and process and a lot of strategic planning. But our goal is to be able to provide a professional environment, to be able to give the kids the opportunity to be linked to schools, to be able to link to different types of courts and surfaces. And that's what we focus on a lot in the younger age groups.
Yep.
Don't do it in the older age groups, but we certainly think it's important in developing young talent and facilitating opportunities for them to develop small structure principles, 1v1, 2v1, 3v2. That's where that sort of futsal comes into place. But we would love to get to a point where we have the ability to create a full-time academy program where it incorporates school, students, coaches.
Yep.
So the whole lot, obviously. That will take time, but we certainly would love that opportunity.
The season is fast nearing its conclusion, the 2024 season. And then obviously then we've got the summer season before next year, the 2025 season comes around before we know it. Have you got any programs in place for the off season, whether it's futsal, whether it's academy competitions? What do you have in the pipeline for people that reside on that southeastern side of Melbourne or who are currently at the moment at Dandenong City?
Look, our programs all run for approximately about 10 and a half months. We give about 6 weeks off across the year. It's not one 6-week block, but the objective is that in the off season, the younger age groups are engaged in futsal along with training, whereas the older age groups will be engaged in tournaments. And that's one of the things that I really observed in the kids that we brought overseas to Spain, in the 15, 16, 17-year-olds. We did a bit of an analysis on how many tournaments the kids had played in the last 4 years from the age of, say, 14 to, say, 17. And in that time, we were able to identify that the maximum amount of tournaments that they'd be engaged in was approximately 4 across 3 or 4 years. So a tournament is obviously a different type of experience, and we felt that they were quite nervous leading into those tournaments. Obviously, one, that they're in Spain, on the other side of the world, competing against different countries and different teams, but the exposure to be able to play more games in tournament-style environments was something that we found that was very different in comparison to kids in Spain. Kids in Spain are playing tournaments all the time.
Yep.
So yeah, that's one of the things. Obviously, futsal, and then we'll get them involved in training environments all the way through to just before Christmas, and getting involved in tournaments. So just to give them that extra edge.
Yeah. Interestingly, speaking of tournaments, I was up in Sydney last week at the Football Tech Junior Tournament, and for me personally, that was an eye-opener, a real massive eye-opener. I had my son competing at that. And speaking to Jason Trefiro about one thing that he mentioned, just in conversation, he said something. He really wants to take more and more kids, more and more squads to Europe, because nothing beats playing in Europe and these junior tournaments where you're immersed in the football. Everyone's together, everyone's traveling together, and it's a traveling party. But you're coming up against kids your age who are just Juventus Academy, Real Madrid Academy, Barca Academy. It's just unfathomable, like the quality and the caliber. And I think the experience that the kids are taking away from that, and the parents, is like just something to aspire to. But something that we spoke about earlier today, Ljuban, was or was it yesterday? Was the difference between standard of kids here and kids over there isn't so great when they're younger, but obviously as they become teenagers and as they become adults, that's where the gap starts to really widen. At what point do you think here in Australia we really start to lag behind the rest of the world as far as junior and youth development?
I think it becomes incredibly. I mean, it depends what level you're talking about. But if we're talking about top level, in my honest opinion, I think it makes it very evident at the age of 14, 15 years of age. The tactical understanding of the game is significant if we talk about top level players. So I think, up to the age of 12 or 13, we can compete if we're talking high-end players. But after that, it seems to drop significantly, in my opinion. And that's why, if you look at, how many players do we have in the Australian Socceroos competing in the top 5 leagues of the world? There's not many.
Yeah.
So there's a big gap there. There's a big gap for us to work on and continue to develop. And I think, if we look at, the training environments that these kids are in, a lot of them are training in the older phases 4 to 5 times per week. So, they're immersed in that culture. They're training more than us. And, we've got our under 23s who are training, maybe 3 times per week. It's probably not enough. Our under 18s 3 times a week. So we as a club are looking at possibly introducing another session to our training program for 2025. And then, take steps to try and introduce more sessions even in the younger ages. And I guess our rationale for that is because we don't believe that the kids are playing out on the street. So if it was 10, 11, 12, 13 years of age and they were out on their five-a-side courts, we probably wouldn't do that. So that 4th session may be just an environment, facilitating an environment for them to play in a safe environment. And it might be small-sided football, just an opportunity for them to be together, because a lot of these kids aren't getting that opportunity at home. Whereas in Europe, they're with their mates at school, they're playing football. They're in the evenings with their mates playing football.
Constantly playing it, yeah. And what would you say to parents or to so-called experts that say, oh, it's too much for the kids? 3 sessions is more than enough. 4 sessions would be overkill. That it'll lead to injury. It'll lead to muscle fatigue. It'll lead to this. It'll lead to that. What would you say to that, particularly in view of what you just said, that over in Europe they probably in the evenings, even in day offs, they're mucking around and playing. Whereas here, they're not doing anything.
My professional opinion on that is that we don't do enough, and that's why we have fatigue. So, it's not because they're kids. If they're on the monkey bars every day, they'll be able to be on the monkey bars every day. If they're playing football every day, they'll be able to play football every day. It's got to be obviously controlled. I'm very aware of that. But it's a myth, in my opinion. And I would say that, these kids need to be on the ball as much as possible to not have injuries.
Yep.
So the other way around.
Yeah, yep. It's a very good point, and I've heard a lot of people, particularly speaking to a lot of the soccer instructors or teachers that are at some of these soccer-specific schools. But down here in Victoria, we've got a few of them, and I know there are several up in New South Wales as well. And from observation, and they say the more and more the kids are active and the more they're involved, they're basically conditioned. They're conditioned to withstand the trauma or the pressure of extra training, extra exercise. So their bodies actually become fitter in the general sense in that regard.
Correct. I mean, the only thing I think there is a gap in all of this is that what tends to happen with schools and what happens with say clubs is that club is pulling the child one way.
Yep.
The school is pulling the child in another way, and you've got the child in the middle who doesn't know what to do. And there's not enough collaboration between school and club, which ends up in a breakdown for the child. So we always try and collaborate with those schools very closely and try and make sure that we're on the same page in relation to supporting the children. If there is a sense of fatigue, we don't want injury to occur, but we try and then develop them from a physical aspect to be able to give them the opportunity to do that.
Fascinating conversation we are having with the technical director of Dandenong City, LJUBAN Palinic. LJUBAN, we're going to have to get you on the show before the end of the year because this is a really interesting topic, and I think certainly one that parents of footballers, of young footballers and coaches should definitely be taking heed. We're going to have to leave it there, unfortunately, but thank you so much for coming on the show. Really enjoy what you're doing out at Dandenong City. We're going to follow that very, very closely, and we certainly look forward to news of any more international tours coming up, no doubt within the next 12 months.
Thank you, Tonchi, for the opportunity to be on the show.